identifying things that remain customer-centric, that enable us to market with integrity and with compassion, but which nonetheless enable us to communicate more effectively. And so that's an inquiry that never ends.
You hear all the bull about marketing every day. Make your money in your sleep. My new offer is crushing it. My guru could beat up your guru. It's time to go right to the source and get the truth about marketing. With your host, the founder of copychief.com, Kevin Rogers.
Hey, welcome to The Truth About Marketing, the show where we dig deep with the real marketing experts to understand exactly what works and what doesn't so that we can affect change in our businesses and the lives of our best customers. With me today is a dear friend, Michael Fishman. Michael, thanks for being on the show with us.
Oh my goodness, super pumped to be here, man.
Thanks, man. Michael, I've known you for a few years now. I feel very privileged to be invited twice now to your yearly summit called the Consumer Health Summit. It's an amazing gathering of the brightest minds in consumer health services and marketing. I've never experienced anything like it. It's an event that I anticipate all year long. I don't say that lightly. I don't say that flippantly. I'm not blowing smoke here. And anyone who goes to CHS says the same thing. It's like this family that changes a little every year, but the quality somehow only gets higher. Could you sort of frame a little bit what CHS is? And I should mention that just in case anybody thinks this is some kind of pitch, it's a very closed door event, invite only. So sorry for the tease. But could you talk about CHS a little bit and how it came to be?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. Consumer Health Summit, or CHS as we call it, is really a passion project. I'm not in the event business, even though I've done a few events here and there. But CHS, I started in 1994 as a client dinner, a private dinner, about 18 or 20 people. Some legendary people were there, including Eugene Schwartz.
Wow.
And that was a client dinner. Then it became a full-day event, including people beyond clientele into influencers and other entrepreneurs and other personalities in consumer health. And so ran as one full day for quite a few years. And then maybe after 10 years or so, took it into 2 days, ultimately charged for it after it was essentially free for the first 10 years. But it has always been, curated as an invite-only event. It's not marketed. It's not recorded. So right. It's quite a safe space. It's very hard to find an ego there.
Yeah.
It's a group, as you've experienced, it's a group of people that, if anything, trip over themselves to be as helpful as possible to every other person. And, the interest, and this is, the actionable piece for other masterminds or other venues, or even people that just go to, quote unquote, networking events. Mm-hmm. When you show up with the intention to help as many people as you can, that is actually the way to leave with the most value for yourself. And that's essentially, the soul of CHS.
That's right. That's a great description. And that is the energy that you assemble there. And the way I put it into perspective for people, anybody who's in copywriting or studies marketing on the level that is required to succeed certainly knows about the legendary copywriter Gary Bencivenga. And I tell people to appreciate this event, you have to understand that Gary goes to no events. And he's a hero among copywriters. So for me I never thought I'd be in a room with Gary Bencivenga. But I look around the room and Gary is like just the cherry on top of this amazing Sunday as I'm looking around going, wow, 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 wow. Oh no, and Gary's here too. you know. So on any other day it would be enough just to see Gary, but it's just incredible.
And by the way, I mean, he is as much a student as anybody.
That's right.
He's got he's taking as many notes. Mm-hmm. He's asking as many. I mean, he's as curious as a newly minted student. you know. So that is inspirational as well.
That's a great point you bring up. I noticed that early in my career when I was still very green, going to lots of conferences, that many of the speakers and the people who inspired me the most would be right there next to me, taking notes the whole time. I remember Perry Marshall very distinctively sitting in every talk where a lot of people, type of events where people tend to gather in the hall, which certainly does not happen at Consumer Health Summit. But, that tends to happen, especially with the marketers, the more experienced people. They think, we know it all. Let's just hang out in the hall. Perry sits and takes notes. And like you say, it's the great minds in our business who never stop being curious and looking for that one great idea that they can capitalize on.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think it boils down to, as soon as you think you're done learning, you're actually done pretty much with everything, because, number one, our world is changing much too quickly to ever assume that we're done. The people you and I know, and the ecosystem and the community in marketing, in the health community and beyond, I think we're all perpetual learners. And the fact that our marketing and our efforts and our ideas are so specifically measurable drives that learning process to always find that next angle. Identifying things that remain customer centric, that enable us to market with integrity and with compassion, but which nonetheless enable us to communicate more effectively. And so that's an inquiry that never ends.
That's great. Well put. So, Michael, I'm fascinated at this because you've been in this business quite a while. You've been a consultant and investor in the consumer health space for over 20 years now. And you've seen many, many, many marketing tests. And I know that you're a deeply principled guy and that you study consumer behavior on a level that most people would not. And that you, to some degree, can pride yourself on creating predictable results for people. So I love the chance to ask you the essential question of this podcast, which is, what is the one thing that you've tried or seen in marketing that produced the most surprising results?
Yeah, I love this, Kevin. Look, I think all of us, no matter how well we think our crystal ball, tells the future, sometimes we get our head handed to us. But, there was, a couple things. One that I observed and another that I was specifically a part of. Sometimes companies, publishers, product companies have great ideas, and that could be an idea of the founder, an idea of an editor or a product formulator. And if you're lucky enough and have the resources, companies survey their customers before they launch a product to gauge the interest in that product, right? In terms of a description of it, the title, as specifically as one can gauge interest, such that when you launch, you have a pretty good idea that you're going to get a warm reception. And I've seen past situations where that kind of research was done and all the validating exercises came through with green lights, essentially. And yet something fails nonetheless. That in that case, it's a very significant surprise. The publisher of Prevention, Rodale, with whom who I supported for almost 20 years in marketing strategy, they had a book called New Choices in Natural Healing, which launched with two separate creative teams, two entirely different creative approaches, and this was offline marketing and direct mail channel. And both, two world-class creative teams, and both flopped. Both flopped. But, there's something that we all think about, which Dean Graziosi actually calls marketing stamina, which is to have a good sense, have enough research, have enough understanding of your business to know that when something flops, it's not necessarily a product problem, but rather creative execution, which is really the subject of your program.
Right.
And not coincidentally, after two flops from two world-class creative teams, Rodale had enough belief in the product and in the research supporting its launch to bring in Gary Bencivenga in kind of a, all or nothing effort to launch this book. And, he wrote a piece that ultimately created a historic success.
Wow.
So, a couple things there. Number one, a failure, it can be creative execution, not a fatal flaw in the product. And that bombs can turn into winners. I mean, it's that much of a turnaround. Creative execution can actually be a 4 or 5, sometimes, 4 to 5x improvement in overall response, which literally turns a bomb into, something very, very successful.
Yeah.
The other thing is that a couple years ago, I was involved with, a very dear friend who has a very significant platform and community in the consumer space with food and cooking and health. And in the beginning of my work with her, I gave her everything that I knew and could ever count on to work as reliably as gravity. Like the physical laws of the universe were the degree of certainty that I had with this thing. And she had her business has a brand name, and I had her put her personal name as the from in the emails and really humanize that, and created some changes in the opt-in function on both the homepage and the blog page to really harness and acknowledge the psychology that happens on homepages versus blog pages and these kinds of things. And it all bombed. It all bombed. I mean, it was so in my face in a way that I could have never anticipated. Wow. And, look, it was a good lesson.
Yeah.
Because there actually is nothing as reliable as a physical law in marketing. And, the key, I think the key there is, which most people adhere to if they're smart and if they're managing their risk, which is that everything has to be tested no matter how great it looks. Or even no matter how much it adheres to the structure or the formula of something that has worked previously. The time moves on, opportunities change, the market changes, the consciousness in our markets changes, and you just never know. You just never know.
Right. Yeah. Boy, it hurts though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it stings. It stings. And that was actually a project that I did on spec. And I said, look, let's work together for 30 days. I'll give you the best of what I have. And if after 30 days it hasn't performed, then no harm, no foul. There's no charge for my time and service and contribution. Yeah. And 2 weeks into the month, I said, I won't bill you for this month because it's clear this stuff isn't working.
That is wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so you named some great examples of how it'll never be completely predictable. Times change, markets change. Were you able to identify one key factor that led to the surprising failure?
It's a great question, and I'm of the belief that even for companies and blogs and businesses that are not positioned with human beings, like Oprah, Martha Stewart, Tony Robbins, really strong, iconic personal brands, for businesses that are not positioned with human beings, I still am of the belief that when you nonetheless humanize a business by having its founder or having its leader or having its principal, teacher, or author, even peripherally visible, just kind of warming up the situation from the sidelines and a little bit visible, I'm a believer that is always a benefit because ultimately our readers and our customers want to be led and they resonate more with human beings than with non-human brands, and actually frequently will spend more money and participate more robustly over time, what we call lifetime value, right? Mm-hmm. So that was really the premise that I was coming from. But I think what it turned out is that this brand in the cooking and food space is so beloved that, look, it's a tribute to what they're doing, that adding the name of the founder, adding the name of the lead author didn't make a huge difference in the outward face and in the marketing of their business, because their business is so beloved and their readers and community are so loyal that it didn't create a measurable result to do something that in another situation could create a dramatic improvement. Yeah,
great. Well put. And this person is couldn't be lovelier. And I hate to tease people like this, and maybe you'll indulge and share, but I happen to know who you're talking about, and she is very present on the site now. So clearly, I don't want people to think, well, maybe she just wasn't appealing. Certainly not the case.
Well, it's not a tease; it's just honoring a confidentiality. Yeah, sure. But the key. I don't think it's instructive necessarily to name it, other than to say that I was going to make a point here, Kevin. The key is the balance of the presence of the founder and the visibility and the equity and the affection for the name of that business.
Right. Yeah.
When you're not, Personal Brand Inc., when you have a brand that you're sort of trying to balance with your own personal name, that's kind of the balance that you're trying to strike.
Sure.
The fact that we couldn't get a measurable result by bringing more emphasis to her personal name actually showed how strongly she's developed her community.
Yeah, great point. And it's one of these businesses where the title itself, in many ways, encompasses the USP. And so it's really targeted, strong marketing.
That's a phenomenal point. Phenomenal point. The name of the business is itself the promise. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just talk about this 1 minute more, just because I don't have time for television, Michael. There are shows, I'm not against television. It can be a waste of time, but I'm in a position where I'm just too busy. But one show my wife and I just indulge in is Next Food Network Star. Mm-hmm. I love this show. It's a marketing study in action. It's human drama. And it's always fascinating to me what goes on with that show, because it is about a personality can only get you so far. If you got to be able to bring the goods. I mean, you're serving dishes every week to Giada and Bobby Flay, and the food has to win at the end of the day. And I think it speaks to what you're saying, that really understand, yes, because I'm with you 100% on, and I'm always consulting people, get out in front of the product. Whose is this? Who are people communicating with here? And if that hasn't been thought through, that needs to be thought through. But when you're starting a business, maybe you should consider, like, really what is up front here. Is it me the person, or don't let your personality trick you into thinking that people don't need a great product as well.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And look, in terms of building a sustainable business, there are many more implications which we could discuss, all day and beyond. It's harder to sell a business ultimately that rests on the back of one person, particularly in the positioning of that business.
Yeah.
And it is striking a balance, because a well-formulated business with a personal brand arguably, gets more loyalty and gets, support, and gets more lifetime value. And by the way, when I think about dollars, or how many dollars in a launch, or lifetime value, to me, the immediate translation is how many people were helped.
Sure.
And I don't care if people are selling golf clubs, rosebuds or vitamins. It's about helping people and giving them what they want, and I always translate into that, because I never want to lose the fact that we're supporting human beings.
Right.
But with that said, there's many implications in terms of the viability of a business long term, and the ability to exit that business if you're building a real business versus something that will sort of wane and deflate when the founder loses interest.
Right, and it also affects how present you'll need to be even on the ride up. As
Right.
you know, Michael Gerber talks a lot about this in E-Myth, how at what point can you step away and have things not fall apart? And if,
right, being in it versus on it, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, great stuff. Well, thank you for sharing. Most people, just look for this great opportunity to brag about the genius moment of inspiration that created a huge windfall. So,
Well, look. I'm not even a big sports guy, but sometimes the analogies are perfect. I mean, the people that hit the most home runs, or anything in sports, the best are they're batting 300. I mean, whatever it is, but the best in any sport or business strike out a lot.
That's right. Yeah.
So the name of the game is to test enough to actually have a sufficient number of failures. If all your tests are winning, you're not testing enough, and that's a pretty good way to look at things.
Right.
Because to really identify the boundaries of your messaging and even the size of your prospect market, you have to push. And pushing means being a little bit daring. I mean, you want to stay in voice, you want to stay congruent, you don't want to get into shiny object marketing, in my opinion. But you do want to, inside of that voice, take chances. Because if you're not failing, you're not really identifying the boundaries of your ability to communicate and your ability to expand your impact.
Man, you are the most quotable guest I've ever had. And I tell you what, my bullet writer is going to love you because you're doing the work for him as we speak. I love it, Michael. And you're not a copywriter, so it's even more amazing. I'd like to, if you don't mind, just spend a minute on a topic that you've been educating me about, if not directly, in that we're part of a company together. Where we both consult and provide marketing leadership. And that issue is gender neutrality. Mm-hmm. And this is, I know, something you're very passionate about. And it's something I want to say, I've always been aware of course, but I'm newly passionate about it. Because I really feel that there is a shift. And I don't know if this is me being myopic. But I feel that there are people now in the spotlight who have taken the idea of equality to new levels. And as the father of a 9-year-old girl, this is incredibly personal to me. But when I see people out there like Ronda Rousey and the U.S. women's soccer team and the way they're embraced across all mediums, in the way they hold themselves up, not as one-dimensional sports figures, but as people of the world, young women of the world, with all the pressure that entails, and do a great job of being very real. One thing I love about Ronda Rousey, I don't know if you're familiar with her, Michael, but she's the UFC champion fighter. Mm-hmm. And she really fought to get in the spotlight with Dana White, who runs the UFC. He said, nobody wants to watch two women beat each other up. And she said, I think you're wrong. I think you're not seeing the big picture. And of course she was right. But when you see her interviewed, she is really herself. And I think it's incredibly empowering for young women to say, you know what, I get to do whatever I can dream of and make it my own. So I don't know how eloquent that was or wasn't, but I appreciate that this is a passion topic for you. So if people are out there thinking about how do I appeal to both men and women with my product, it's not as simple, I don't think, as having two icons on your homepage that say, click here if you're a man, click here if you're a woman. That's one way to do it.
Right.
But what are better ways of doing it, Michael?
Well, it's, man, you just asked the best questions. And, this is not a defensive statement, but the fact of the matter is anybody that knows me knows I'm completely gender blind in terms of business and life. That's just how I am. So I don't see. I'm not looking at limiting gender roles or even traditional gender roles the way our parents and grandparents may have lived or thought about the world. So that, where I'm coming from is that in the fundamental psychology of men and women, regardless of who's head of household, regardless of what activities they participate in, regardless of what the income might be, in a single person or in a partnership, marriage, whatever, in our fundamental psychology, I don't think there's any escaping male and female energies,
right, mm-hmm.
and male and female biology,
right.
And so, for that reason, the way in which we communicate with each other and the way in which businesses communicate to consumers and readers, it can be measurably. It can be measured. If one, look, we can read copy and evaluate it through many different lenses, mm-hmm. right? We can look for compassion. We can look for benefits. We can look for community. We can look for timeliness. There's so many lenses through. When I read copy to review, there's maybe 6 or 7 times through, each looking through a different lens. So with that in mind, there's certain words have, male and more dominant male or female energy in them. And so when we talk to people, not only in their awareness, but in their unawareness or in their reptilian brain or survival-based brain, if you will, mm-hmm. or what I sometimes call the can't tell, what they can't report on, but which nonetheless is operating in their brain, that's where we will resonate and be more effective and, in fact, be more compassionate when we acknowledge the fact that men a lot of times speak one way and women speak another, even if the subject matter is what we might consider to be gender neutral. Now, to me, a truly gender neutral subject would be money.
Okay.
So, and people have tried to do money products for women, and, there's a huge site called Daily Worth, which is doing an amazing job. Amanda Steinberg running that, supporting women with financial advice. But for the most part, money is a gender neutral subject, and I think the language is less critical, although it's always worthwhile to review language through that lens among the many others that I mentioned. But when you have the key, because what I've seen, Kevin, over the years is that even a product that looks gender neutral, mm-hmm. when you put it in the marketplace, you may end up with 70% men coming in and buying. And you say, wow, I never could have dreamed that. But 70% of the buyers, even when marketing to, kind of a 50-50 general audience, we're overrepresented in terms of the number of buyers that are men. Mm-hmm. Or women, whatever it is. So sometimes you think you have a gender-neutral product or service, and it isn't.
Right.
A higher price point generally will attract more men. That's not a sexist statement. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. A company that has no reputation preceding it, meaning an unknown brand or an unknown company or an unknown person, by and large and historically will attract more men than women, because it appears women need more trust and more, they need to be more, previously aware of you. Mm-hmm. And these are things I've validated hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So that, beyond the way in which men and women have evolved in their work roles and their family roles in contemporary society, which I acknowledge 1,000%, there are still ways that the brain will resonate with language and messaging
right.
that are very specifically male or female.
Right. Now, in a situation where you're launching something, you don't know yet what the audience will be, and you do your best to not write to a gendered avatar, so to speak, and then you do get like a 70-30 split. Do you ever go back and look at the copy and say, are we more testosterone heavy here than we realized? Or do you then shift or start to market differently based on those numbers?
Well, amazing question, because sometimes you need to essentially learn the lesson and say, whoa, the market just told us we're positioned differently. And then the question becomes, is that a product? Is that an attribute or a characteristic of the product or of the messaging?
Right.
Like, did the messaging drive that result, or the essence of the product itself? And that's important to distinguish.
Right.
And then you get into some testing. But look, ultimately, we can't move the market, right? We can't. The market is like changing the market is like holding back the ocean, right?
Right.
It's not so. When the market shows you something which is clearly like a market-driven result, then you speak to the result. You don't try to change. We can't move the market. It's too big to ever move. All we can do is give the market what it wants, or trigger the market in some sort of in what I call latent demand. iPods, some of the early Apple products triggered latent demand. No one ever said I need an iPod.
Right.
But there was enough usefulness in there that a latent demand or a dormant demand was enlivened or ignited by providing something that had a convenience and a anyway, that whole story.
Got to have it factor. Yeah, great. Okay. Michael, I want to respect your time, but you're just one of these guys I could talk to all day long, and maybe you'll grant us a part 2 at some point, because there's so many topics we didn't even get to that I know you have great thoughts on. But quickly want to bring up a forthcoming project that you revealed at the last Consumer Health Summit that was really stricken by. It's called Start One, Stop One. And it's one of these, the premise is so simple that it almost defies logic. So talk about what this is and how you see it affecting people in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kevin. And, what we see in the range of categories where we're giving people information to be better tomorrow than they are today in whatever way: relationship, money, health, fitness.
Yeah.
For the most part, people that are motivated do nothing. Motivation is not a sustainable state of mind, and sadly, it doesn't generally lead to action. But action can lead to motivation more reliably. And so, Start One, Stop One we'll be launching momentarily, meaning in the next few weeks, and will be a very large consumer platform, if not movement, as it's currently envisioned, enabling people to take simple actions, i.e., start one thing and stop another, from what they already know, because our English-speaking public in the U.S. and beyond has been receiving so many messages about health and wellness and diet and fitness and longevity for several decades. And the best of that marketing, Kevin, as you know, because you create a lot of it, has content and useful information embedded in it.
Right.
So whether people have ever bought anything or not in health or wellness, most people, I believe virtually everybody, could at least name one thing they could start, one thing they could stop, and they'd be correct about it. That would be supportive and even noticeably a noticeable improvement in their health or wellness or energy or pain relief or weight or whatever that might be. So this is really about Start One, Stop One is really enabling people to take baby steps, to feel accomplishment, to feel successful. I think in most categories of self-improvement, people's most familiar experience of themselves, if they look backwards, is one of disappointment, if not failure.
Right.
Because people either don't take action, or they do take action and they don't get a result, or they get a result and they don't sustain the result. So this is really about helping millions and millions of people take action, feel good about what they've done, and actually sustain a result, and then get inspired to do more for themselves.
I love it. And it's start the number one, stop the number one.com. And if you want a lesson in simplicity and clarity of message, I suggest you visit that site. It's a great image up top of a crushed soda can and somebody walking away, clearly in exercise shoes, and then there's a line in the concrete. It's almost subliminal. It's very effective, and just every word on the page has a purpose. And, above the fold, under the photo, the first thing you see is it's simple. Just a lot. I think this is a great, to me, example of all the things that you hold dear, Michael. So I think this is going to be a huge success for you. I'm excited to share with everyone.
Thank you, buddy. And I'll just tease one thing, and maybe if I have the honor of a part 2 here, we can get into this thing that I call words to outlaw. The words habit and change will never be used in this platform.
Interesting.
Because of how people have just a fierce resistance, both in their awareness and in their unawareness, to those. I mean, I think those words are a recipe for failure. And so those words are actually outlawed from this platform, and we're going to find ways to never use them.
Well, I love that. That's a great concept. The words you don't use are just as important as the words you do use.
Right.
Huge. Okay, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I want to respect it, and you've given us great gifts today. So I hope we can do it again, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. A lot of my friends and heroes have been shared this platform, so it's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Hey, thanks for listening to another fine episode of the Truth About Marketing podcast. I do appreciate your time. I know you have lots of choices. And if you're loving this podcast, I'm loving having you listen to it. And let's celebrate our relationship, won't we, with a review, a 5-star review on iTunes.com. That's how they judge these things, right? iTunes looks at how many people rate and review your podcast, and then they decide if it's worthy of telling other people about. So if you think this is a good podcast and you think other people like you should hear it, if you go to iTunes and rate and review the show, that's the best way to get the word out. Really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about how to improve your copy, you can do that on the inside at copychief.com and visit copychief.com/TAM to get all the links and resources we mentioned on today's episode. The Truth About Marketing podcast is produced by James Clouser, graphics by Cassie Clouser, and the bullets for this show, so handily displayed for you, written by Dan Ludgater. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.